Welcome back. Moving forward, in this lecture, we are going to dive into another project, but this time we are going to, in fact, work on our own project, right? So in the previous project, we took a look at the sample CSV file provided by Salesforce, but here we're going to create our own, and then we're going to see and evaluate and use Einstein artificial intelligence to predict text. So first things first, obviously we need to create an Excel file, right? So what I've done is, to save time, I'm not going to actually go ahead and create all these questions and labels. So let me pull up the Excel file that I've created. I've called it customer satisfaction. And if I open it up, so you can see what it all has, and you'll notice a bunch of questions, right? Very similar to the previous one, but of course we created our own, right? So this is a customer satisfaction survey that we sent out, right? Hypothetical satisfaction survey, that is, with a bunch of questions. And then of course our labels are customer satisfaction, customer support, event planning, if I scroll down, member satisfaction, and then newsletter satisfaction. So about 49 records or so, 49 examples. Of course you can add more if you choose to do so, but this gives you a good idea as to starting from scratch. Okay, so you're working on a project, whether it's for yourself or for your customer or a client. This is a good way to actually learn something from scratch. So we're going to use the Einstein AI to predict certain text off of our data. So once our Excel file is created, right, and I've saved it, next step is, of course, take the file and place it on a public web server or URL, right? So what I've done is I've went ahead and gone to our WordPress, right? This is our site, which is our CLEDS eCampus site. And from within the dashboard, what I've done is I've placed the file onto our own domain. So we can use this particular link or URL when we execute the curl commands. So within the media library, I've uploaded the customer satisfaction, or CUST underscore satisfaction.csv. So if I click on it, notice it provides me the URL for this file. So I've copied this URL. Of course, I need to have this URL so that I can work within my command line editor tool, which is Sigwin, that we've been using all along to execute the curl commands. Okay, so just give you the prerequisites of what I've done so far. Now, apart from the Excel file and placing it on to a URL or web server location, of course, we've also met all the prerequisites, right? Which means we have the Einstein AI installed, or we're using Einstein platform services, that is. We also have generated the token, right? So we have saved the token, we need that. And again, recall from our previous lectures, I'm just recapping here quick. So we have all the prerequisites in place. We have the CSV file, and we have uploaded the CSV file onto a live web server. Once we have that, next, of course, begins our editor part, or the command line tool, Sigwin, where we can actually start to execute the curl commands in certain steps. So if I were to quiz you at this point, right, you remember the steps that we need to go through? The first step is to create the data step or data set. Second step is to verify the data set itself. The third is actually training the data set. Getting the response from the data set is 4. And then finally the result, right? So these are the steps that we will follow based on our customer satisfaction CSV file. All right, perfect. So let's move ahead. Let me bring up the command line editor. So here it is. And the first command, of course, what I've done is I've placed these commands in our notepad, right? So you can save it somewhere else, and then you can just copy it and paste these commands, so you don't have to type all of them at once. So let me show you where these syntax is, curl syntax, or all the commands are in one place, so it's easier, and that's a good practice too, so you don't have to, so you'll come across fewer errors, right? So if you have everything in place and you're well organized. So I recommend to all my students to be organized. So before you actually start jumping into code, just think your project through, right? So make sure everything is in order. So I'm going to bring up this notepad here for myself that I use, and what I've done is I've labeled it. So the first step is create the data set, followed by the command. Next step is verify the data set, followed by the command, train the data set, get training status, and then try out the model. Okay, so that way it's easier. And of course, from our prerequisites, we have the token, and we will get the ID as soon as we run the first curl command, which is to create the data set. And if I scroll to the right, notice on line 7 or row 7, if I scroll to the right here, you'll notice that the file path in this instance is coming from our claydesk.com eCampus site, and here's the CSV file, which is again the file that is being uploaded to our WordPress dashboard or to this web server. So I'm going to run this first syntax here. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, right? Control C, and then bring up my Cygwin, do a paste and recall. A quick way to paste is just use the wheel on the mouse, right? And it pastes the actual command. And then hit the enter key, and what this is going to do is in fact fetch the ID for you, right? So let's make a note of this ID. Let me expand that a little bit so you can actually see. There we go. So the ID here is 1055238. Okay, so that's the ID that you'll use in the next step. So let's take the next step here. Let me go to our next step in the process, which is verifying the data set. In order to verify the data set, you will need to enter the ID. Okay, let me bring up the ID again. It's 1055238. So I'm just going to write it up here. 1055238. Perfect. So that way you have the ID saved. So I'm going to copy it, go back to my verified data set curl command, go all the way to the right, and then of course change and place the ID here, so that Einstein knows that it's going to pick this particular ID because that's what I ran to create the data set. Now if I need to verify the data set, I have to have the same ID. If I use a different ID, it's going to throw an error. Okay, so I'm going to copy the next set of command, which is verifying the data set, bring up Cygwin again, paste it, hit the enter key, and this is going to tell me that or give me a message that it has succeeded, right? So this is what I'm looking for, that the data set has now been verified, and it gives me all the labels. Okay, so if you go through it, and I've shown that in the previous project as well, so you can take a look at this and transfer it to Sublime or Atom or any other editor. Just kind of look at the JSON code so that it's easier, and it's a good practice to do so. So once I've verified the data set, the next step is to train the data set. Okay, so let's go ahead, and before I actually copy it, let's verify this particular training here. I've got the token, and then the name, the model. Perfect. And the end, it's the train part, right? That's what we're looking for. So I'm going to copy this and then bring up our tool again, paste it, hit the enter key, and it's going to go ahead and train the data set itself. And this gives me the model number after I train. So I'm going to copy this model, just right click, copy, and just paste the model number, right? Because it changes every time. So if you were to run this analysis again into a different project, this model number will change again. So otherwise you're going to get some errors. So once I have this model number, I'm going to copy this and then ensure that to get the training status, which is our next step, first I need to have the correct model number towards the end here after training. Okay. All right, let's copy this. And this curl command will allow us to get the training status for our model. Bring up the segment, paste, hit the enter key. Perfect. So we're moving right along, right? So it tells us that the learning rate and the epochs is 1,000 iterations, and it trained this model ID and so on. And I've discussed this in the first project, all the details. So right now the status says it's running. Okay, so now my training status is running. And the final step, of course, is to try out the model, right? So this is where my question is, or my prediction is. Prediction text, right? So what question am I going to ask from this model? So I'm asking who is attending the event. And you could ask any other question, right? Because based on your CSV file, you can ask other questions, and I'll demonstrate several other questions that you can ask, and then take a look at what probabilities results that we get. So I'm going to use who's attending this event, but I'm going to make sure that my model number is copied again, and then I'm using the correct model number here. Okay, otherwise of course I'm going to get an error. Perfect. So the question is, the text is who is attending the event. So Einstein is going to look at the intent at this point, right? It's going to evaluate. So I'm going to copy this final step, bring up segment, paste it, and then hit the enter key. And this is going to give me the probabilities and statistics as to, based on my question, right? And my question was, who is attending the event? So based on this question, let's take a look at the probabilities. But of course it gave me an internal server error. Let's run it again. Okay, so it ran this time. And if you do get these server errors, it's probably the HTTP 500 server errors that you get. And it happens occasionally with Salesforce. So not to worry, just paste it again several times, just like I've done so, and eventually you'll get the results. And here's my question, right? So who's attending the event? And here are the results. So it starts with the probabilities. So I see that the event planning label has a probability of 0.98. So it's 98% probability lies with the event planning area. So what I will do is I'll forward this event, or this particular area intent, to the event planning department, or the event planning manager, or the concerned individual. Similarly, the customer support probabilities are only about 6% or so, 0.006. Satisfaction is 0.0025. Member satisfaction is also very low, and so on. What Einstein does is, again, based on your natural language, right? You ask who's attending the event, it calculates the probability. Let's change a question. Let's go ahead and first bring up my CSV file so we can just kind of formulate our question, right, based on our data. So let's go ahead and pick up a section here for newsletter. Okay, so based on the newsletter, I'm going to come up with a question or intent and have Einstein evaluate it. So let's go back to our question here. I'm going to go ahead and change the question. So I'm going to say, when will, or let's say this, who are the newsletter authors? Okay, so I want to find out based on this particular question. So just change the question, copy the entire syntax again, bring up Sigwin, paste it, hit the enter key, and let's see what probabilities do we get based on our new question. So again, the question was, who are these newsletter authors, right? So this is the question, and the probabilities, the results that we get is that newsletter satisfaction label gets about 86%. Okay, so that way I know that this is the area where I need to pass this information to, and so on. So you get the idea. This way, Einstein, based on the ability of artificial intelligence, kind of gives you the analytics that you need to make better informed decisions. So in this lecture, we in fact ran through the entire project in one go because we've learned from our previous project, and I've explained project 1 in detail. Here, I just wanted to run through the entire setup project in one get-go. So that way you can actually see and bring all the aspects of your learning together into one place. So I hope this helps. Practice with it, create several CSV files, bring in additional data, and then if you have any questions, post in the discussion area. I'll be more than happy to help, and so will other students. I enjoy the student engagement. So with this, let's move to our next lesson.